Good morning again. My name is Tushti, and this is Surendra. And it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. As Brenda read in our reading, the woman of Samaria asked Jesus, "Where is the best place to worship?" And he answers her affirmatively, "Worship the Father in spirit and in truth." In spirit and in truth means inner communion with the Lord, in the expanding peace of meditation within our souls. Thousands of people go on pilgrimages every year to the holy places all around the world, and they're seeking healing or the experience of God, some thinking that God is outside of themselves, and yet God is omnipresent and can't be contained in one church or another or one specific holy place. Cosmic consciousness permeates all creation. So God is always with us and within us. You know, Surendra and I had the opportunity to travel, and we visited Europe and Thailand and Nepal and a little bit in India, and this was actually pre-Ananda. So we weren't that long in India, but we went into the small village chapels and the grand cathedrals in Europe and the beautiful temples in Asia, and there is a spiritual power and presence in these places where people have come for hundreds and hundreds of years to pray and to worship to the divine. And there's something that you feel, and it's when you walk into this beautiful temple, you feel a presence. What is it? No, it's a more subtle and refined vibration than our own, and it awakens something deep inside that starts to call to us. And we need to experience that throughout our day. So actually, I will just say a little story about when Surendra and I came to Ananda, I think 1996, about. And Swami Kriyananda had recently moved to Assisi. And we had never met him, but we studied the teachings and became active in Ananda and even moved into the community without ever having met him. And there was going to be a pilgrimage to Assisi. And we said, we need to go and we need to meet this man who has created Ananda, who has written many, many books and songs. Some of them you experienced this morning. They're so beautiful. And this man who literally changed our lives. And we went, and we arrived on a weekend. And so we went to Sunday service in their beautiful Temple of Light the next day. And after service, Swami left the temple, and we followed out after him. And I remember sort of walking a little bit behind. You know, when you stand in front of someone that you admire and hold in the highest esteem, you want to present your very best. Everything is sort of in order. And when you stand in front of your spiritual guide and teacher, you feel a little more exposed, or I should say, I felt a little bit more exposed, like sort of my soul was showing. And I was concerned that he might see the shortcomings of my devotion, or being as a devotee. And so I was walking a little behind and not really paying too much attention, but all of a sudden Swami had stopped. And there we were in front of him. And we sort of gathered around, and he was looking around at each one of us and smiling. And it was so sweet. And I thought, he's not judging me. I'm judging myself. And he was just sending out his love and his friendship to each and every one of us. It wouldn't have mattered how long my list of self-definitions happened to be. We were really blessed because we had opportunities that week to be more in his presence and to really have the sense of who he is and the greatness of his vibration. And the Ananda Assisi Retreat Center is actually outside of Ananda. It's outside of Assisi. It's up in the rolling hills, and it's really beautiful. So we would make little pilgrimages into Assisi, and you know, Assisi's very, very old, very old. Everything is stone. You know, we walked along the cobblestone paths where St. Francis and St. Clare had walked in the 12th century. And we visited the convent of St. Clare. And of course, we as we walked along the cobblestone streets, we also stopped for a gelato and a cappuccino to really experience all the wonderful flavors of Assisi. And the following year, I had the opportunity to go on another pilgrimage back to Italy, and this time we stayed over a little bit in Laverna. And Laverna is where St. Francis received the stigmata, and it's an incredibly powerful, holy place. And it awakens within you a deep longing, and it's so deep, it's palpable, it's like the beating of your heart. And all you want to do is to be quiet in silence and meditate. And this is the point. You know, we can come to Sunday service and we can go on pilgrimage, and that feeling, that longing can be awakened, and yet we have to do our part. We have to nurture that divine spark. The masters tell us within us we have a portable paradise. And more importantly, and most importantly, they tell us that this life, the purpose of this life is to know God. And we have to experience that in our souls. This body, your bodies, are the temple. And we need to set time aside and go inside. And sometimes, it's very easy to forget that we are a soul in a body. Sometimes we think, that we're a body with a soul. But we're really a soul in a physical form. And, it's part of God's plan, His Leela, the play of this material world. It's intoxicating and captivating, and we get drawn out. From the very first breath we take, our energy starts becoming expressed outward. We're seeking nourishment and nurturing and pleasure and love, and it grabs hold of us. Until at one point, somewhere along the line, something within us wakes up and begins to call a little louder. We have to honor that voice, that inner voice. We have been given these tools to utilize and to find God. And I just lost a point that I wanted to mention. When we go inside, that's when we tune in to that divine presence. And we have that opportunity each week when we come back and go on those pilgrimages. But at one point, we need to realize that it is our responsibility. When last Tuesday, that was what I wanted to bring up. Last Tuesday, we celebrated Swami's birthday here in the temple, and we heard readings of his poetry and his humor, and there was music and there was dance, and it just exemplified how pure and simple Swami has guided us to experience, share, and love God. And at the end, the altar was just beautiful, as it is today, but it was especially beautiful that night. At the end, we had an opportunity to come up to the altar and offer our own prayer and our flowers of devotion. And there was an incredible silence, and it just permeated the space all around us. And no one wanted to leave, because again, that inner space of God had been awakened. When there was a song, we didn't sing it that night, but it's so simple. It just is beautiful simplicity and expansiveness of Swami's music. Rest in God, live in God. It's like Divine Mother's calling to us. And when I was a nurse, I worked as a nurse for many, many years, and I actually worked in labor and delivery and in the newborn nursery. And at feeding time, we would swaddle the babes and prepare them to go out to their mothers, and they were crying, and we thought they were hungry. It was really their soul cry. Get me out of here. Here I am again, oh God. We do that. Here we are, right? So we would take these babies out, and these mothers had labored and delivered a child and they were exhausted. And we would hand them this child, and they reached out, and they took that child. And it was the most beautiful image, and I'll never forget it. There was so much love in their hearts as they reached out for that child. And I really can't think it's any different with our Divine Mother. She's been reaching out to us and calling to us for a long, long time. You know, we are children of God, and we need to greet each day in attuned to God's, good morning. Take Divine Mother with wherever you go that day. Offer a prayer of gratitude for the blessing of a day. And, be childlike. In Swami's book, it's actually Master's teaching, the essence of self-realization. And he says in there, don't be formal with God. Play with Him, tease Him, scold Him if you like. Of course, always with love. For He is nearest of the near and dearest of the dear. He is closer to you than the very thoughts with which you pray to Him. With the very thoughts with which you pray to Him. I love that line. We've come to know God. It's our mission. It's our birthright. And it's simple. We just rest in God and live in God.
What is the best way to worship? This reading today is basic to Ananda's teachings. It's all about the inward journey, the importance of meditation, and the need to withdraw from outward pursuits that compete with our spiritual progress. No surprises there. We've been schooled in these matters ever since we stepped onto this path. And even if you're new to Ananda and to these teachings, I'm sure that you get it, that merely attending church or going through the motions of any religious practice without the proper consciousness does not make you a spiritual person. As Garrison Keillor once noted, any more than standing in your carport makes you a car. But the fact is, hearing what we need to do and then doing it, between those two, there is often a period of years and even lifetimes that intervene. We have what are known as excuses. Things get in the way, don't they? Things that persuade us to put our spiritual practices on hold while we attend to other demands instead. And of course, most of those demands are really just a host of routines and desires that we have euphemistically dubbed our personal goals and important priorities. On that score, believe me, I speak from personal experience. I have no doubt that meditation is the one true path to God realization, and yet I could give you all sorts of excuses why I don't spend more time doing it. And if you can relate to that at all, the obvious question is, are we crazy or what? Clearly, the reason that we have a reading like the one today, and the reason that we need to hear it over and over in various different ways, is because the message and the inspiration are soon lost as we go about our worldly commitments. We have children to raise, elderly friends and relatives to care for, bills to pay, errands to run, duties one after another, and all kinds of things that we would like to acquire. Our lives are busy with trying to make ends meet, mainly because somebody keeps moving the ends. I wonder who that could be. Well, the good news is that meditation does not require a particular place or designated length of time to practice. You can do it anywhere, at any time, even for just a moment. All it takes is a little intention, the energy and will to act, and bingo, you're headed inward for the pause that truly refreshes. In his recent book, Religion in the New Age, Swami Kriyananda urges us to cultivate a new vision of ourselves, a new vision of what we consider to be our belongings. Someday we're going to leave this life, taking with us only our souls and our karma to the next destination. Nothing is truly ours here. Not our homes, our careers, our families, our reputations, our talents, or even our faults. Nothing. All of that stays behind. When we think of these things as defining us, it locks us into ego consciousness, and it locks us out of the opportunity for inner communion with God. The new vision that we need to perceive is one that places the divine at the center of all that is, all things, all people, all conditions, all events. Now, obviously, your eyes are not going to cooperate in delivering that new vision to your brain. It just doesn't work that way, nor will any of your other senses, because it's outward. We're projecting outward instead of realizing that the sensory perception does not enable us to commune within. Now, I'm sure that we can all agree that from a sensory perspective, I am here, you are there, and between us there is a distance that delineates our separation. We can agree that we experience the same sense of that separation. But what does it come to for us? It's self-defeating because we're simply not engaging in realizing that there is this oneness of all things. Given the teachings that we have been blessed to receive, we must understand that everything owes its existence to the one creative source that inhabits and abides in us and in everything else. What if you knew, what if you really knew that everything you encounter in life is ordained for your spiritual progress, your growth, and your ultimate freedom? Would that change how you respond to some of the difficulties that challenge us? You know, we have in Swami Kriyananda a living example of someone who no longer sees with the senses. He perceives the love that comes in all experience, whatever that may be. And heaven knows he's had enormous challenges in his life, devastating by most people's standards. And yet I can think of no one who is more at peace and more in blissful harmony with all that is. Given that example, And given that we can see in him the result of adopting that perspective, does it not make sense for us to strive for that same consciousness ourselves? I have no doubt that every second of my life is designed for me to advance to a higher awareness. Yet, I can still manage to forget that time and again when hit with a hardship or a disappointment, maybe an unpleasant confrontation, or even a minor inconvenience. And so, if that sounds at all familiar to you as well, I repeat, are we crazy? You know. But wait a minute, I have an excuse. Society has stacked the odds against me. You too? You know, ever since I was born, I've been surrounded by deluded people. People whose ideas and rules and hidden messages are based on wrong information. It's not my fault. Society tells me thousands of times a day that it knows best what will make me happy. If I'm feeling depressed, I should reach for a pint of Haagen-Dazs, or a Lexus, or maybe a luxury ocean cruise. I just want to have fun and be happy like the people in all those soft drink commercials. Or the ones, those young folks who react with absolute ecstasy at having finally discovered the perfect cell phone provider. I mean, have you seen any of those ads? Those people are about to jump out of their skin with excitement and glee. So you can see that it's not my fault that I don't meditate more. I'm a victim of my conditioning. My parents meant well, but they were laboring under the same false guidance like everyone else, and so I grew up deluded too. Well, you know that I'm being facetious, but not entirely. No. You know, what we need to do is, again, just get back to that center. P.T. Barnum was absolutely right when he said that a sucker is born every minute. Because we are constantly just getting in our own way. And most of all, we succumb, to some extent, large or small, to wanting more than we really need. How much do we really need? When we do that, that desiring assures that we are going to suffer the consequence in some form or another, whether it's large or small. You know, we're God's most intelligent creatures on this planet, and we still haven't figured that out, or so it seems. I think it's probably safe to say that the great majority of people, at least in the West, are obsessive compulsive about worshiping their mistakes, which is hardly the best way to worship. Is it difficult to break the habit of that behavior? You bet it is. If anyone thinks that walking a spiritual path is easy, that person is probably not on one. Society, the outside world, is not going to support your inward turning efforts. In fact, it will use its leverage through peer pressure especially to drag you back into the fold and into the mold. Misery loves company is a very powerful truth. it's also true that no one I have ever known has given me near the amount of trouble that I have given myself. Why? Because so often I have made the choice to be like everyone else who chooses to suffer. Well, as Tushti mentioned, in 1996, my life took a significant turn, thanks primarily to her. Tushti coaxed me into taking a meditation class with her at Ananda in Seattle. And I certainly prefer the me that has emerged from that experience and throughout these years. My only regret is that I've had to forfeit all of those excuses that I was once able to put forth. And I'm not saying I don't still try to do it every once in a while, but I know in my heart that all of those excuses are bogus. Where we worship, how we worship, is entirely secondary to the spirit and devotion with which we worship. Tushti and I teach meditation classes, and in them we emphasize above all that it's not about the minutes and the hours you spend in your daily practice. And it's not about having dramatic visual and physical sensations. It's about what you become. Therein lies the proof. It's about what you become. We have been blessed on this path to know what truly matters, and we know how to have the joy that is ours to claim. There's no great mystery to it. Yes, it takes energy, will, and perseverance to keep your momentum headed in the right direction. And there's an age-old method that will always serve you well as you move along. In fact, the folks at Nike have condensed it into just 3 little words. Just do it. God bless you.